Alright, it's about 4:30. We're all set up now. We're on the same piece that we were on yesterday and saw those toms. Not in the same spot, but we had just called in a few jakes on that side, but decided to come up here, see if we can find those toms back. Our plan is just to sit here for maybe an hour and a half and then go try to roost some birds on a different property for tomorrow. So sit here, do a little call and see what happens. Redhead, it's a ways in there. There's at least two of them.
Are they up on the hill or are they down?
They're low, they're coming this way.
I can't see them, so I don't know where
Yeah, they're still coming. In the decoy. You see him?
He's done. This is nuts. What the heck? This is insane.
Well, it's definitely a fun turkey season. I figured I'd throw that hunt in there just as kind of a wrap up. I really enjoyed going down to Kansas, hunting with my buddy Nolan. Can't thank him and his family enough for inviting me down, and a quick but fun trip resulting in the first Kansas bird. So that was a lot of fun. And before I get into the meat of this episode, which is the property tour, I wanted to share with you guys Midway USA put together a little discount code for you guys to order some products. They teamed up with a number of different brands, including Muddy, Stealth Cam, Hawk, Avian X. There's a number of different brands that you can apply this discount code to on Midway USA's website. So the link is below. The code is Jared10. Click on over and get some stuff ordered. Always appreciate the support and hope you enjoy this video. All right, guys, it is May here and I'm at my farm. That'd be kind of cool today just to do a comprehensive walkthrough of the entire property, or at least as much as I can cover without making it a 2-hour-long video. But you know, that's one of the most common questions I get is just updates on the property, what's going on in the off season, stuff like that. So I figured I'd do an entire walkthrough. I've walked it a couple of times this spring, you know, just trying to cover every inch, just continue to learn it, backing up a little bit. As most of you guys know, this property is still new to me. I'm just coming up almost a year of ownership. And because of the time of year I got it, last year there's just a limited amount of things I could do. I mostly focused on getting some food in and stuff like that. But this off season, I've put a lot more work into it, and I love how it's coming together. I mean, I love this property before, but I mentioned it's very raw, and it was going to take some work to improve. And so I think I'm making some real progress there. I'm excited to share some of those things today. But in general, just kind of want to walk through and just more or less bring you guys along for some boots on the ground through this whole thing, kind of see how it lays out, see some of the pinches. I think that's one of the cooler features of this property is how many good funnels and pinches there are. I've said it before, and it's still, to me, one of the best things about this property is that if there is a good deer here, your chances of killing them are very, very high, higher than probably any property I've ever hunted. My job is just to make sure that there are deer here, so that's where I'm putting a lot of my work is into adding cover. I think I'm good on food based on the deer numbers and the deer population, but increasing cover, increasing holding capacity is my #1 goal on this farm. So let's kind of take a walk through here and just show you around. This area here is right off the road, right just getting onto my property, and it's super thick, but it's very clear the deer, I've seen a number of beds in here, the deer definitely bed right here off the road. It's a little high point, and I kind of came through here. Some of it was getting so thick. I came through here and kind of cut little lanes, make it easier for them to walk in certain directions. So I cleared out this little path, which it's already growing up pretty good, but at least it's usable, and the deer can kind of funnel down into this bottom that way, and then they continue to walk this way quite a bit. We'll get down this bottom here where I've done a decent amount of TSI. I probably cut trees 5 or 6 different days on this property. A little bit earlier in the off season, a lot of TSI. We're kind of in the bottom here where I started to get into some tree cutting, a couple ash trees and locust trees. I focused a lot on getting some of the locust trees killed, but I cut a little bit of everything. I did some hinge cutting, some girdling, some that I just completely fell, so I did a little bit of everything. One of the things that I struggled with or found out that I'm not good at is areas where there's a lot of good trees. So this section and all the way along this creek on both sides, these trees are in a program, so I get paid like CRP on these trees, which is pretty cool. But they were planted, I think, roughly 28 years ago, and so when you plant this many trees to the acre, it takes a decent amount of tree thinning. Otherwise, you're not going to optimize the growth. You know, they start competing with each other pretty good, and that's kind of what I was faced with, or am facing, is the need to cut even good trees. So, like, you know, some of these good oaks in here need to be taken out, or even walnuts or maples or whatever. You know, typically good trees, nice straight 28-year-old trees that you're needing to cut. You're gonna having to pick and choose between good trees and which ones to save, which ones to release. So I found out I'm not great at those decisions. You know, historically it's mostly been trying to cut out junk trees. Those decisions are easy. When you're trying to decide between 2 really good oak trees, that's tough. So that was something new for me, is just having to bite the bullet and really picking good trees to release, even if the ones they're competing with are also pretty dang good trees. But it's just kind of a must in these tree plantings like this. Otherwise, you're just never going to get what you want. You kind of got to look ahead to the future and the best valuable trees moving forward, and let the other ones go. So here's this area where This is kind of a little bit of high point, looking down into this bottom south facing slope. I just wanted to get some horizontal cover in here, so I took out a number of trees on this spot, and I envision, especially in the fall, these deer bedding on this point. And it leads to one of the coolest spots that I found on this property from walking it a lot more thorough this spring. Hopefully you can tell, I'll give you an aerial shot as well, but this little pinch of planted trees is only like 25 yards wide. And then there is an open bottom with a bunch of canary grass and stuff, so they can travel through there. But if they want to stay in the cover, you can see how pronounced this trail is. And this trail, I had a camera about 15 yards here on this pinch, and this is where I got the most pictures of that buck that I killed back in November. He was constantly using this spot, as were a lot of other deer. It's just a really good pinch. But I never really walked in here much other than putting that camera and getting out. Kind of left it alone, but this offseason I spent a bunch of time in here, and the access is so good as well, coming off this pasture, popping in, that I picked a tree and did a little TSI around it. There's a couple half-dead ash trees anyway. Knocked those down, kind of laid them in a strategic direction to where I can come in, put a stand in that tree, and it's gonna be dynamite. I mean, it's just such a good pinch. You're gonna be looking at like a 15-yard shot at the most, you know, potential good recurve stand even, because it's gonna be tight quarters. But the access, the pinch, everything sets up perfect. The wind, the prevailing wind, even the visibility down this bottom, if there was something out in the bottom to call up to you that's not gonna get downwind of you, I mean, it's a dynamite setup. So I'm excited to get a stand put in that spot for sure. We'll go take a look at it here. So here's that open bottom that I was talking about that you'll have good visibility to. I mean, this trail is just beaten down. So it's basically an inside corner. You can see where it opens back up here, with the deer coming through this corner. Another couple dying ash trees that I cut down for better visibility out there. Cut some trees down here, a couple locust trees, more ash trees. Cut those down just to make sure there's no deer gonna go out that way and get downwind. But there's the tree right there, that split oak tree. You know, you're looking at a shot of 15 yards or less right here to this really good inside corner path. Again, just sets up perfect. Any deer coming from that direction is likely gonna come this spot, same thing this way, and you have good visibility for potential calling out there. And not far from here, within 100 yards, is where I have a pretty good food plot set up with good variety. So, you know, it's just a natural movement pattern from food and thick cover and bedding. Really excited about this spot for sure. You can see the kind of the lines, the rows of planted trees through here, some really good looking oak trees. I love these areas like this, but like I said, it just takes a little work to make sure you're letting some of those good trees go. It's just a really thick bottom down here. I've noticed a ton of deer going down here to bed. I don't know exactly where they're bedding. I think on this kind of where the creek makes a little peninsula there is my best guess, but I just know I have this clover plot up here, but the deer constantly coming in and out here at prime time feeding, so I know they're not bedding far from this spot. There's a bunch of trails that lead out of here. Here's another one right here. This is that little clover chicory plot that I put in last summer. And it did really well. The only issue this spring is I had some thistle come back in with a vengeance, so I did have to kill some of it. It's pretty typical of these cattle pasture-like properties. I'm doubting you could see that, but I just jumped a decent buck, had pretty good nubs on him out of this, again, that little peninsula. This creek that's surrounded by the planted trees, it makes a bunch of S-curves and creates all these peninsulas, and they like bedding in those spots. But back to this clover chicory plot, I tried spraying it with Roundup, spot spraying the thistle that was coming up with Roundup. It didn't really do anything, so I had to come spot spray 2,4-D and just get rid of it, and obviously killed some of the clover and chicory. So I've got a few bare spots like this that I actually raked and reseeded, so those will fill back in. You can see this clover chicory is really good, and those spots where the thistle wasn't competing with it. I do have some mowing to do in here. I haven't mowed it yet this year, but the deer are in this nonstop. Every morning, every night, I get pictures of bucks and does feeding in this, and that's the power of the clover chicory blend, especially this time of year and in the summer. Just really good nutrition value, good protein, and the deer obviously love it. So I love this spot for that reason. I do have a tree stand right here and this walnut that Grant and Max and I hung last year. I did not hunt it at all, but it is in a really good spot based on this movement that I see on camera all the time. So again, nice little pinch, but this food just adds to this spot. Is kind of a natural clearing anyways, and that's why I put this food here, and it leads out to a bigger plot, like a 3/4 acre plot. This is only about not even a third of an acre. But it leads out to this other plot through a gate opening, which is a really good setup too. So we'll walk up that way. All right, so this is that 3/4 acre plot I was talking about. Nothing in it right now except for actually pretty good clover coming back in. I frost seeded an annual clover blend, just more or less to add some nitrogen back in, because I plan on putting this back into brassicas later this summer. But you can see that little gap connects it to the clover chicory plot, so the deer come out there. And this is actually where I had my first encounter with the buck I killed. He came out in that pasture over there and kind of stayed well out of range, but that was my first encounter, first time seeing that buck in person. And that's just right where I was talking about that pinch, where I set up that tree for a stand this fall. He came out somewhere right in that spot, which again is where I was getting most of my pictures of him. So cool little spot right here. Again, really good access popping down this pasture. You can see all the clovers. Clover actually looks pretty good. It's a fast growing clover, and will be good for this soil. I love coming out here and just doing exactly what I'm doing right now, walking around looking at all this stuff. Those of you that own land probably know the feeling, but it just puts you in a good mood every time I'm able to get down here. And whether it's doing work or just walking around or whatever, just puts you in a good mood no matter what you got going on. That's what I love about land ownership, for sure. We're coming into a section here that there's actually a nice pocket of cedars coming up. The deer spend a decent amount of time in. I could probably spend some time trimming and opening it up a little bit because it gets pretty thick. There's a little walnut grove down here. I don't know if you can see it. I have a stand about 15 yards away that I hung last year. Again, one that I never hunted. The deer didn't use that spot as much as I thought they would, based on cameras, but some of these stands just didn't get hunted because I didn't hunt here enough. I used up my buck tag so quick that it was just a limited number of hunts. Got some good rain lately. That's the main kind of creek crossing. When I killed my buck, I went that way on the creek. We're gonna go the opposite way. But I use this creek a lot for access, dropping in at this point and going one way or another. Another really sweet pinch right here. This one's kind of cool because you got the creek on this side, but then it drops off into this big slough on this side. So literally this pinch is really narrow. Kind of reminds me of the old skinny pinch, for those of you guys that remember those guys, Paul Marshall and Scott Ryman. This kind of reminds me of that, like the deer just walking this high point in between two water areas basically. This section of the planted trees is full of really good oak trees, and this is an area I didn't get to cut this spring, so I'll probably do it later this year, early next year. But this is an area where I have to definitely decide between a bunch of oaks, which ones to cut, which ones to keep, because this is predominantly oak in this section. I didn't ever hunt in here, really never came in here until this time of year, this off season. So I don't know what the acorn production was like. I assume there's a decent amount, but not as much as there will be in the future once you start releasing some of these better trees. So coming out of this section, it was predominantly oak. Come out into one of my two main grain food plots. As you can tell, I had this one in beans. This past year, my plan is to put the corn, but I kind of gotta get my butt in gear here and get it planted. I've got it sprayed, but just need to get it planted. Just long, kind of skinny, narrow spot for late season food. Sets up really well, but for now I'm gonna head out into my tillable acres, because that's where I have some pretty big plans to really change this property. This is a kind of a big south-facing grassy slope here. You see all the little cedar trees regenerating in here. So I haven't done a whole lot with this particular spot yet. I really would love to see those cedars grow up, especially being a south-facing hill. It could be a really good bedding spot just above that late season food. So here are my tillable acres. You can see the corn's popping up pretty good. But I'm hoping this is going to be the last year that this is actually in row crop. I've applied to get this into CRP, not just grasses, but also planted trees. So my plan, what I drew up, was a map of more or less the exterior being in planted trees, which it'd be like 8,500 trees, and then the interior being native grasses with a fire break in between those. But I think it would set up really well eventually once those trees actually grow. It's going to add a lot of cover to this. Even the native grasses are going to add a lot of cover to it. From an income standpoint, I actually can make more doing that than I can with the row crop, cash renting this field. So for me, it's kind of a no-brainer. It accomplishes my goal of creating more cover, and it's also more income. And that'd be such a cool improvement to this property for sure. Just have all that cover, and whether or not it benefits me or someone, the next owner, I don't know. Obviously trees take a long time to grow, but that CRP will provide pretty immediate cover, and the trees don't have to get very tall to provide good bedding cover for the deer as well. So again, all about increasing that holding capacity here. adjacent to that grain plot, those beans last year, I had turnips here, Brassica blend here, and again, frost seeded clover into it. That you can see all the some of the thistle that's coming up in this spot, but the clover is coming up pretty good. It'll be good for the soil. I'm planning on doing the same thing. That the brassicas next to the grains provide a really good late season food source and easy to hunt too, easy to get in and out. So I plan on doing the same thing here, not changing that up. But it's nice to have this clover in here for a little bit of extra summer food and hopefully save on some nitrogen costs when I come to plant the brassicas. Here's my other late season grain source. Again, headed beans, but I think I'm actually gonna do a sorghum here this year. It's not that far from my other one, 100 yards, but again, it sets up pretty nice with this other block of timber here because there's a decent amount of deer that bed there. When I hunted over there late season, it was a little bit half and half. I'd say more deer probably came to that one where I was hunting, but I could also see a number of deer up on this hillside too. One change, I did have brassicas down below this one, but I frost seeded my Clover chicory blend here. I'm just gonna keep this whole strip that goes up into the timber into Clover chicory. I already had it up there on that strip, but I added it here, and you can see it's coming in pretty good. I frost seeded it this winter. The clover and chicory coming up through here. I do have some grasses, especially up in this spot, but I just sprayed clethodim the other day to hopefully take care of those. But I'm definitely happy with how this is looking so far for the frost seeding. This is the area that was already the Clover chicory last fall, so it's obviously a lot taller. But again, the grasses came back in this spot pretty good, so I can see though they're starting to die. That clethodim, it just takes a little while, but so this lane is pretty cool. I go along the bottom of this food plot, but then it cuts straight up the hill into this timber. Just to keep that all in green will be pretty cool, and just the way it's at the bottom of the hill, it makes sense to not till it up every year. All right, as I'm coming up this lane, you can probably see all these white tubes here. This section right here of mature timber, these are not planted trees. This is the more mature section of timber on my farm. And historically, because it was a cattle pasture, the cows in here were pretty rough on these trees. There's some good looking trees for sure, but there's a bunch of mature walnuts that really were not gonna get any bigger, potentially blow over in the next windstorm. So I came and actually harvested about 70 walnuts out of here back in January. So there's a bunch of obviously leftover treetops and stuff like that in here. But here in the last couple weeks, I've planted, I've got a few left here. I'm planting 200 trees in this section. Just this section where I took the walnuts out. Doing a variety of species. I'm doing some swamp white oak, some bur oak, some red oak, some black cherry, some wild plum. So a good little diverse mix, but more or less just replacing the trees I took out. Creating some future value there, and there's enough open areas now that I opened up this canopy by taking all those mature kind of pasture walnuts out that were shading a lot of stuff out. There's room to do pretty good with these trees in here. So to plant these, I was taking just a little DeWalt drill with a auger bit on it, drilling the hole, putting the tree in, and then tubing and staking them with these tree tubes. I don't know if you can see that tree down in there or not, but these tree tubes are 5 foot tall, so they'll really protect these trees for a long time to keep the deer browse off of them, and should have a really good success rate up here. But all the way through here, you can see more down through here, so we'll take a quick little walk through. But this section of timber is a big south-facing slope again, so hunting that stand up there, you can kind of see deer bedding on this hillside late season, and then they just kind of mosey out into the food in the afternoons. So it just sets up really nice. It's not a huge section of timber. This side right here is about 4 acres and probably another 3 acres over here. So a 7-acre block of timber, but the way it lays is pretty good. There's a little creek that runs through it. And again, a nice diverse mix of trees. There's a few oaks left in here. And then obviously some younger walnuts that I didn't harvest, but it's a lot of work planting and tubing these trees for sure, but it feels good to be putting some back and hopefully creating a nice diverse mix for the future. Obviously it always looks like a mess when you come in and harvest some trees, but I don't mind it. As a wildlife person, it creates a lot of cover. You look at the canopy, opens up the canopy in a lot of spots like this. So for future wildlife cover, I like it, even though it's obviously not the prettiest at the moment, but it's definitely an improvement from what it was. All right, so this is, or was, one of my cattle pasture areas. It was, good looking pasture, but it didn't really do me any good. So this year it's actually in corn. It's starting to pop up pretty good here. I had different options I could do with this, but ultimately I decided to put it in row crop, start developing some crop history there. One, it's gonna be potentially more food, which I don't know that I necessarily need more food. But also this year, that corn is going to act as a nice screen on this side for getting in and out at the very least. But two, it also starts that crop history to where if I want to put this in CRP in the future, that option's there because it has that farm history, that crop history. So that's kind of ultimately what pushed me to put this in row crop. I considered just going straight in and planting native grasses, but the issue with that is you're kind of missing out on an income opportunity there. So I decided to start with this route. Have the extra food here if I need it, or I could harvest it along with the rest of the tillable. Just kind of see how it does in this pasture. We just planted it straight into the pasture, and I came and actually sprayed this off afterwards. So it looks like it's coming up pretty decent, so we'll see how that does. But we're gonna hop back down into this section of planted trees here, which is where I killed my buck in November. Here's where I fell quite a bit of maple trees. You see how much canopy is opened up right here. But there's a bunch of competing multi-trunk maples I wanted to fall here, create a little extra cover. It also keeps the deer movement down that way, closer to that stand where I killed out of. We'll kind of move down that direction, but I did a bunch of cutting throughout this whole little section here. Some of it was strategic and some of it was, freeing up some of the better trees, which that's what I did most of. Some of the bigger trees I didn't have room to fall. I girdled, but a lot of them I either fell or hinge cut just to kind of redirect some deer paths. The stand I killed out of is right back here. These trails all kind of converge right here, so that's still going to be just a killer spot. It's just enhanced a little bit. I cut a bunch of maple on that side of that ditch that my buck crossed. So potentially even get more deer actually bedding in this spot, which isn't a bad thing because my access is so good. I'm really not going to get hurt by that. But the deer bed close enough anyways that this spot is still really good. I did cut some trees too so I can avoid those deer walking too close to the stand, so that I shouldn't have to deal with that anymore. Keep them out about 15-20 yards. This is a cool, another little south facing slope here. It's only like, I don't know, half acre, 3/4 of an acre in size, but it falls off to the south here. So I did some strategic hinge cutting to create some back cover for these deer that are bedding on here, increase the bedding. Also freed up a few of the better oaks in here by taking out some of the competing either ash trees, or I've also girdled a couple oaks in here and a couple locusts as well. But this will be a nice little bedding ridge that I don't come into at all. A little bit younger trees, but open up some canopy again in here. I did come into the spot when I was doing a little in-season scouting shortly after my buck that I killed showed up on camera. And this rub right here was really fresh. So I don't know for sure that it came from him, but I think there's a really good chance that it did based on the timing of when it showed up and when he showed up. Pretty big rub in this little ditch right here. Again, freeing up some of these better trees in this planted section and creating a lot of additional cover that wasn't there before. And that's the other thing too, the amount of food that was put on the ground just with these trees, on the ground is crazy. I came in here like a day or two later and the amount of buds that were chewed off that quick was pretty amazing. I would assume there's not anything left at this point. It's been a while since I cut all these, but yeah, it definitely had a ton of immediate food to ground level for these deer. Another question, getting towards the end here, another question I get quite a bit is just what my plans are with this piece. And I think about that a lot. I don't really know for sure, but if I were to find another property, likely a bigger property that I wanted to buy, I'd probably sell this one. And so who knows when that'll be. It could be less than a year, it could be 10 years. But just simply due to my goal of owning more acres, I would sell this farm if I had another one to buy. And I guess you can consider that flipping it, but that's not necessarily the mentality I have, because I'm going to treat it like I'm going to own it forever until that time comes. Obviously you saw a lot of the projects that I've done, plus what I have planned. It's a lot of work. It's stuff I wouldn't necessarily have to do if I was simply trying to flip this farm as fast as I could. So I love this piece and would not be upset if I held on to it for a long time. But also I know if my goal is to keep building and own more acres, I gotta be able to let properties go. And that's one of my biggest weaknesses, is falling in love with properties, especially good ones. So we'll see kind of what the future holds there. But right now, I love the way this is coming together. There's already a lot more deer than there was this time of the year last year when I started running cameras. Obviously that food helps. Hopefully the cover's already helping, and it'll just keep getting better from here. But it's pretty cool to see just how much more active the trail cameras are than just a year ago, having that quick of an improvement. So you can see just more TSI work through here, creating a lot of cover, kind of out back by the road now. But thought it'd be cool, again, like I said, just to give you guys a quick walk around. And again, appreciate you guys watching as always, and reach out if I can help with anything.